Amazing. Cool. On the call with me today is my colleague, Jamie. She'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, you can pop them in there. Again, like I said, there will be a Q&A sort of at the end. If you want to kind of unmute and ask your questions, we can have a bit of a conversation. I'll also try to pop in links that are necessary for Jen Green into the chat too, kind of as I go along. But yeah, you feel free to use there if you want to ask a question, if you want to connect with Janie. I will probably be doing the presentation, so I won't be looking much at the chat when I'm talking through things, but I will look at it at the end of my presentation. So I'm just sharing my screen now. Welcome everyone to the Generation Green project launch. My name is Katie, and I'm so glad that you can join us today. Again, this is a Zoom meeting. This call is being recorded. If you are uncomfortable with your video remaining on, you feel free to turn your camera off. Make sure you're on mute. Yeah, this is all these things. I think we're all used to the Zoom calls now. Of course, I already mentioned the chat. Feel free to use the chat. Janie is on the call with me. That's Janie there. That's me. So she'll be monitoring that chat there for you as well. First, I would like to acknowledge the land in which Halton Environmental Network and Generation Green operates on. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations in the Métis, from the Anishinaabe to the Haudenosaunee to the Métis. These lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have a responsibility to honor and respect the land here. As well, we acknowledge and thank Mississaugas the Credit First Nation for sharing this territory with us. I also wanted to do a little quick overview for those that weren't familiar about the Halton Environmental Network, affectionately known as HEN, which I will probably keep referring to it as HEN. So if you get confused, I'm just talking about the place where I work, which is called the Halton Environmental Network. It's the backbone agency of the Halton Climate Collective of Generation Green. We really work to educate, engage, act, and to create a climate resilient, low carbon Halton community. Which is exactly what the Halton Climate Collective also does. It draws on experiences from all of these organizations. So you're kind of joined into this group here. You can see both school boards, all municipalities, Conservation Halton, Halton Region. And the real, I guess, draw of the Halton Climate Collective is to leverage all these different actions and things that are going on in order to, again, build this climate resilient Halton is kind of what we're all here to do. Now, Generation Green, again, if this is your first time joining us or hearing about Generation Green, welcome. This is our third year running the program. It's a complete initiative run by Youth for Youth with the goal of really giving you the ability to take climate action, to become a climate leader, and to support you on your journey as you actively reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to do what the HCC and what HEN is really trying to do, is to build this low carbon climate resilient community. Oops. Amazing. So I did mention that this was our third year. I just kind of wanted to highlight what kind of went on in the past. If you have joined Generation Green before, then you're probably familiar. Sorry, that was a video that was going to start, but I'll let you watch that on your own time. It's on our YouTube channel. You can check it out. Then you've probably been there. You were probably at the conference. You can see some pictures of. You might have been at our virtual conference. You might have been part of these projects. And we're just going to build on all of these things here today. Climate change is an ever-present and increasing the uncertainty about our future. It impacts all of us. And we're really, I guess it's our role and responsibility to the earth and to ourselves to build that healthy future. And we, as part of Generation Green, and you, since you're here, I think you feel passionate about that as well. Cool. Amazing. Like I mentioned, this year's theme was active transportation. It was chosen by our stakeholders. One thing I've come to realize a lot about active transportation, I've been doing a lot of research about it recently, is that there's a lack of youth voices, like your voices, really, in this topic. And I think part of focusing on this topic this year is really to bring your voices to the stage, to the active transportation stage, to connect with planners, to really build more sustainable and healthier cities that are meant for individuals, not just for cars. So why active transportation? Well, in countries like Canada, the transportation sector is huge in emitting greenhouse gas emissions. So, and then just generally around the world, a lot of our transportation networks, the way that we get around is really geared towards cars or road vehicles like trucks or buses or motorbikes. And a lot of these types of devices, a lot of those devices actually contribute negatively to our greenhouse gas emissions, which are, of course, contributing to climate change. So the way we get around each day makes a big difference about our carbon footprint and this goal of moving towards a climate resilient community. Imagine every mile you drive releases carbon dioxide, and that starts to kind of pollute the earth. Imagine all the time that you might spend sitting in the car in traffic. That might impact your happiness or your health necessarily if you're sitting. Walking and biking, there's not many negative effects to that on the environment. It also has great health benefits in terms of fitness and just generally feelings of well-being. So that kind of fits into that. So thinking of all those things, of course, active transportation is such a big topic. That's why we wanted to focus on it. I also wanted to highlight the UN sustainability goals. Here are a few that I think active transportation really connects with. Last year, I was really blown away by the passion that you all had about climate justice and social justice. And I really think that transportation just keeps connecting and building on our theme from last year, because it's really about how do we build communities that are for us, for people that are healthy, that everybody feels connected to, that's connected to the land. So that's one of the big reasons about that I think active transportation is why we're doing it this year. I also wanted to highlight this article, which came out around the time of COP26. And there's a lot of focus and attention on electric vehicles, which I think is awesome. But we always forget, I think, about bikes and walking and the power of just taking action and reducing our use of our cars for short trips and that type of thing. I think one of the big reasons, at least from the discussions I've had, is a lot of people think, oh, it's so easy to just walk or just bike or just do something. It's easy to tackle active transportation as it relates to climate change. But if it's so easy, then how come we're not walking, biking, and using our transit all the time? And if it's so easy, then how come it's still such a big contribution to our greenhouse gas emissions? So I wanted to highlight these are some of the results from a webinar that we hosted back in December. This was from, you can actually find it on YouTube and also on our website. I'll put the link into the chat actually really quick. This is also a place where you can find some more information, some of the things I'm sharing in this PowerPoint, as well as this recording too. So this was shared by the Halton District School Board by Suzanne Burwell and Fred Thibault, and they asked the youth on that webinar these questions. So how do you get to school today? You can see that a lot of people were actually using cars, a little less recycling or walking. You can also see that, just kind of mentioned, there was a lot of negative feelings that were kind of expressed when they asked, like, what's your experience getting to school? I wonder to this group here, if you kind of can identify with any of those questions, you can be answering them in your head as well. And then this was very specifically to the HDSB, but it's the same for the HCDSB and also maybe for yourself. They were wondering if you knew if you were eligible for transportation like buses and things like that. And a lot of students said no, or they weren't sure. So what all this tells me is that there is room for youth voices like yours in this discussion about transportation. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of dismissiveness. Oh, it's just so easy for me to take my bike or do that. Like, we should focus on other things. But there is so much room and so much interest, I think, in this topic, and so many different ways that you can take it. And that is why this project, I think, is so interesting. And if you're interested in taking it, that Google form that I sent out, you might have done, you might see on this link as well. That's just your intention to do a project that focuses on active transportation so that we can push the needle, we can start reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and really working towards that climate goal that we're all working towards to create this low carbon, climate resilient community. Cool. So let's talk about the project. You can see on this little corner here, you'll probably see this little QR code. If everything works, and fingers crossed, you should be able to hold your phone up to that and you'll end up in that project proposal form. If you haven't filled out that form already, I encourage you to go and do so, especially as you run through as I run through this presentation, you'll see that code up there. Whenever you feel motivated, go ahead and take it. If you haven't already, this just shows that you're interested and you want to do the project. So I'm just going to highlight it there because it's going to pop up a bunch of times as I continue on talking about the actual project. Cool. So just a recap, the project in itself, this is what you'll get from it. You do get your 20 community involvement hours at completing the project at the end. You get to take climate action. You get recognized from us, from the HCC team, all of those organizations I mentioned at the beginning. And also on April 25th, we have a project showcase. This is our in-person event. If you remember back to that impact slide, we did an in-person conference in 2019, a virtual conference in 2021, and then we did and of course this year we're hoping to be in person in 2022 at that. So there's potential to win prizes there. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so what is the project? So the goal of the project is really to reduce as much as possible our greenhouse gas emissions. So you get to choose how you want to do it. So this is where your creativity, your innovation comes in. And this is just kind of a run through of the different steps that I sort of highlighted. You can see that first you might want to do some research. You joining this presentation, I've listed through a couple of different things. You might want to look at some other things as well. Of course, you want to submit your project proposal so that we know that you're joining in, that you're ready to get into this. And then you want to start recording your action. So basically the project is just you taking an action, however small or big you'd like. And I'm going to get into how that all works just right now. Quickly, I'll just do the timeline. Of course, I'm going to mention it because it is coming up real soon. February 22nd is when our project proposals due. In March, you can kind of expect once you've committed to the project, they'll be doing more of these webinar engagements to help you with the project, to talk to more municipalities about what's going on, to give you the knowledge and the tools and the stuff that you need in order to get the project done. The project is due on April 10th. It's going to be a Google form similar to the project proposal. And then we, of course, like I mentioned, we have our project showcase on April 25th. Okay, so what is the project? Basically, what we're asking you to do is to take an individual action. And part of that is we give you a GHG calculation sheet. So if this is your second or third year doing the project, you'll be very familiar with this calculation sheet. If this is your first time, then no worries. It's very simple and easy to use. So basically, we're asking you to take action by actively reducing your use of vehicles through a period of time. So you can walk only, you can bike, you can try using, if you have an EV bike or an EV scooter, you can try using transit, you can look at it from different angles. And then, so you can just do the individual action, and that is enough. But if you want to take your project to the next level, you can do individual action plus. So the plus part, which we'll get into it a little bit, is looking at the barriers and asking, why don't I take my bike every single day to school, Mac? Why don't I walk all the time? What is stopping me or my community, my school, my family, just wider? You can look at those types of things from taking active transportation all the time. So it's looking at your own individual action. So just individually walking more or taking your bike more, and then adding that extra community focus on it. Cool, so let's talk a little bit just about the individual action, and just bear with me as I quickly share my screen. Can you all see? No, right, so I just want to quickly show you this calculation sheet. Again, if you're familiar with Gen Green, then you've probably used this before. You can see here, if your individual action is just to reduce your vehicle use, then you're just going to complete this form here, and this will calculate your GHG. So that will actually tell you how much emissions you're actually reducing through your action. So basically, it's really simple to kind of fill out. You do your baseline, and then you do your action. The difference between those is the impact. And there's a little step-by-step on how you can fill this in. Ideally, do just kind of go about your day as normal for 2 weeks or so, and then input your action afterwards, and then you can fill these things in here. So you can just go down how many days. 2 weeks is 14 days. Say you did your other action for another 14 days. You can fill in all those distances. If you're wondering how you can find the distances, you can use Google Maps, you can use Strava, you can do lots of different things in order to fill those things in. And of course, then you can use these coefficient numbers on the side, fill them in, and you'll get your impact on the bottom. So this sheet is for you. It's accessible on that link that I actually put into the chat earlier. It's a very scroll to the bottom. There's a little password you have to put in. You get the password once you fill out the project proposal form. So that's kind of how that whole process works. If you have questions about this, no worries. I don't expect you to know all about this calculation sheet right now. We'll go over this too once you're kind of committed into the project, but just wanted to introduce that to you now. I'm just switching my slides over back to my PowerPoint. Amazing. So that's the individual action. Now let's talk about, oh, sorry, I wanted to highlight this really quickly because I will talk about it later. Outside of the calculation sheet, there's also lots of other resources there that you can help you to succeed. So if you're wondering, there's a toolkit, there's also the rubric. Again, I'll talk about these a little bit later in the presentation too. Okay, cool. Let's talk about Individual Action Plus. So these Individual Action Plus projects do that individual action. So you still do the 2 weeks of driving and the 2 weeks of walking, for example, but you also look at other things on top. So you can look at a community project, which is a lot about awareness raising. So do you look at what are the barriers to going to schools? Do you do a survey or an online campaign? Do you take a picture of your commute every single day and you can see how it changes and what kind of happens? Do you want to do a map of where all the bike repair stations are in your neighborhood so that others can also benefit from that? Do you want to do is like bike safety important to you? Is there a lot of things you don't know about that? Is that something, a reason why you maybe don't go down the streets, for example, and just bike or walk around? And then you can create an infographic. You can do a survey. Maybe you ask your parents or you ask your school or you ask your class, like, why don't you do more active transportation? What stops you from doing this? You can create a great online survey that way. All of these types of things are looking at the community as a whole and just interacting with active transportation. I know personally, I always get nervous biking on the streets with cars. So I love bike paths. So maybe just kind of finding out where the bike paths are in your neighborhood. And maybe you can also recommend where you think there should be bike paths. So you can kind of look at your school, whether it's just your family, your school, like a school I said, or just your wider community. So these ones focus a lot on looking at what those barriers are. So of course, you can ask yourself when you're thinking as that your project-wide, you can ask yourself how many people did you survey, how many people are using these resources. You can look at different metrics, and that all is included into your final project, which I'll go through in the rubric in a second. Another part of this Individual Action Plus is looking at urban design and urban geography. So it's like looking about, we kind of mentioned it before, those barriers. Maybe you redesign, there's a street or intersection that you know of that's just generally terrible when you're walking around. It's definitely more geared or designed towards cars. Why don't you try redesigning that street with some other things in mind? Again, a part of this could be creating a blog. It can be just interviewing people out there at the street, counting how people are actually walking there. So you can kind of look into this urban design as urban geography. Like maybe you look at a particular intersection that's close to your house and you just count how many people are actually walking or how many cars you see. And then you can reimagine what the street would look like if it was built not for cars, but for people instead. So that's kind of rethinking the way that we move and we build and we think about our cities. So those are two ways that you can kind of do that individual plus. All of these sort of ideas are things that we've brainstormed as a team. You might come up with different ideas, both for the community, for the individual action and the urban design. So that's up to you. All of these sort of initial ideas will be available on that website link I put there too. So you can always refer back to them if you feel inspired by any of these as well. That's what I mentioned, those sample project ideas, as just mentioned, and you can usually add more. I think I'll keep adding more projects ideas too. Again, you can find that link in the, on that website link I think I put in the chat there. If not, I'll put it again. Cool. So here's some tips on how you can get started on your project. First, you want to pick what you want to focus on. Are you only interested in doing the individual action because that fits with you? Then that's totally cool too. You'll have access to the calculation sheet. You can start recording, take pictures. You can maybe do a little visual aspect to that. So you can kind of focus on that. Or are you interested in that individual action plus? Do you like urban design and geography? Are you thinking about cities? If you attended one of our webinars in December with Chris from the city of Oakville, he shared this great resource, I think it's called City Picks, where you pick a city and then you can start adding in different elements like bike path or tree or those types of things in order to redesign a street in your own vision. So you can kind of do that as well. You can use those tools. All those links are available on our website as well. You want to try to describe your project. So for you, as you're creating this project, it'd be good. The project proposal will help you do that. But you want to kind of get what's your idea, what's your goal, what are you trying to do? Record what happens. So if you're doing your action, you're kind of working through it. Does something go wrong? Is there something that's happening? Like just kind of write down how those actions are. It's good to keep track of things while you're doing it rather than trying to remember at the end. Stay positive, keep with it. You kind of sign up right now. Again, if you're intending to do the project, I encourage you to fill out the form if you can through that little link there. If not, you can also go to that link that I put into the chat. It's Generation Green FAQ project. And you can also find the form there and fill it out. So if you want to do the project, you're just thinking about it, join in, keep doing it, keep track of everything, and then of course, submit your final project on April 10th as well. So don't forget to do that because that is how you get your final 20 community involvement hours plus are added into our project showcase where you can win those extra prizes, etc. Cool. And I just kind of highlighted, it's the same information again for you. These are the big steps. These are the big ones. It's pretty simple. Pick your idea, calculate it, implement it, do it, submit it. And this is how you're going to get started. And as you join the program, I'll be keeping tabs on you. I'll be reaching out to you. I'll always be open and available for you to meet one-on-one if you want to discuss your project. It's open to everyone too. So we are also here to support you as a team too. So you're not left wondering what you're going to do by yourself. You're part of our Generation Green community, and we're here to help you as well. Right now, the immediate things you want to do is you just want to identify your project, think about ideas, and start choosing how you're going to be doing your project. Are you going to do that individual? Are you going to do that individual plus? Are you going to kind of, what are you going to do? That's part of the project proposal, is just putting your idea front. You don't need to know everything now. If your idea changes over time, that's cool too. So yeah, just put your intention in to do something and we'll follow along. And sometimes things change, that's natural. And we'll talk about that too as you join Generation Green. Cool, like I said it many a times, what I ask you to do right now is just to fill out that project proposal form, take your project to the next level, don't give up, and really be involved with Generation Green. Like I said, this active transportation, I think, is really lacking youth voices like yours. Speaking to municipalities, they're very interested, I think, in what you guys bring to the table. Schools are too. Do you ride an electric scooter and you don't have any place to plug it in? So that's not really an option for you. We'd love like maybe a little section in your school where you could do that. Do you skateboard to school, but there's no place to keep all your stuff when in between classes? Those types of things are things I think that adults like administrators or teachers or principals or people who work in government, they don't necessarily think of. That you have a very unique perspective. And this is an opportunity, I think, to really think about those things as we sort of build and I guess grow as a community. Amazing. I did mention briefly about some other tools, but the toolkit is similar to previous years. So I didn't really highlight it in this presentation. It's just a little bit more information about active transportation, some sample calculations, that type of stuff. I did want to highlight what I think is new this year for a lot is this rubric. So you can find this on the website. This is what the judges panel will look at if they're evaluating your project. In the project proposal form, you can choose to be part of that, to be evaluated or not, so that's up to you. But this rubric, really what they look at is they look at the impact, look at creativity, they look at the innovation, look at your knowledge, your base knowledge of the subject, and then the final report as it is. So they do kind of take into consideration how you're actually talking about what your goal was, how you did your project, and what the outcomes were. So those are the three sort of highlighted areas when you're keeping track of your project to keep note of when you're doing your tracking and your recording, your measuring. Another big thing in that final report is we love those visuals. So if you're doing an infographic, if you're taking pictures, if you're doing a little video, like a bike safety video or something like that, all of that can be part of your final project as well. It's really up to you. And that kind of comes from that creativity and this innovation. In this rubric, which the link you can find on that website link again that I put there after you've submitted your project proposal form. This will also be emailed to you next week after the project form closes. They'll kind of goes into a little bit more detail about each category and what we're actually looking for. So again, and if you do have any questions, you can also reach out to me as well. Cool. Remember, of course, I mentioned this before just because it was important, but I wanted to highlight it too, that I'm here to support you as well. So if you have any questions, of course, there'll be questions at the end of this presentation, and I will also be available throughout March and April in order to connect with your project idea, to explain the calculation sheet as part of some webinar engagements, and just to make sure you have the things you need in order to complete the project. Awesome. I also wanted to quickly highlight something that I think is really interesting. And in Calgary, they're doing something super similar to what we're doing here. So they did a project where they actually asked kids, and they asked from elementary schools specifically, how they could improve their school community to get people to take more public transportation. So this is the link here. It's a CBC article. If you want to go check it out and make that part of your brainstorming or your inspiration, you totally can. And these are just 2 quotes that I pulled from it. But basically what they wanted to see and ask is, how can they make the commute in front of the school more accessible to people rather than to cars? So part of that, what they asked was, they asked them to design, to write down things they liked, like they wanted more playground space, they wanted things to be fun. You can imagine too, like when it's nice outside, when you can see sidewalks, if you draw things on a sidewalk, how many people stop and actually do or follow those lines? I don't know if you've seen it at this downtown. I know the downtown Halifax, while I was there, they had these walking routes. So they're like, stop here and jump up and down, or dance in a circle here. Like, how much does that stop or get people to actually pay attention to how they're moving? So they wanted to do some fun things here, add more benches, add more trees. And it was a really interesting project. And that's something I think if you're interested, you can find that article that are related to this, because that's kind of what we want to do too. We want to look at our spaces. We want to see why we don't get to walk as much. Is there a question of, well, maybe it's not safe for me to walk on streets. Why is it not safe? Oh, it's too far for me to do that. Okay, but is it really that far? Can you find other routes, or can you look at things in a different way? Or is there spaces in your school that can be used to support or encourage people to walk more? Is the street in front of your school not really used, only used by cars? Could it be repurposed for something else? Those types of questions I think would be really interesting. And you can, of course, incorporate them in your project if you're interested. Just remember that we all worked collectively to combat climate change. We are part of a global community, and the things that we do here, I think, have great impact. And like I said, we're all moving towards this low carbon, climate resilient community. And your voices, I think, have a lot of weight and a lot of importance. So this is an opportunity for you to connect, to think about the world in a different way. And I think just to explore different aspects of the climate action or the climate world in a different way too. Amazing. Having said all that, here's the QR code again for that project, and I will take questions now. If you do have to leave, it's about 5:30 now, then do feel free to do so. Not before at least grabbing the link or grabbing the QR code or the form. If you want to kind of email me any questions, I will be available on the Tuesday. Monday is family day, in order to answer any questions. But if you have any interest in doing a project and getting those 20 community involvement hours, and I encourage you just to submit the form. That way I know that you're interested. I will make sure you have all the stuff you need, and then I'll make sure you're invited to all of those March webinar engagements. So, and of course, if you know other people that might be interested in the same opportunity, then you can definitely move through and share the link with them as well. Something I'll mention quickly, which I didn't put in the presentation, we do accept group projects. It's a maximum of 4 people for a group project. That is in the form and also on the website too. So you feel free to work within groups, especially for those individual Action Plus. And yeah, you can also ask me any more questions whenever you need. So